Here's a question almost nobody can answer honestly. Did you choose what you believe, or did your brain choose it for you long before you had a say? Two people can grow up on the same street, go to the same school, face the same hardships, and one ends up devout. The other ends up certain there's nothing out there. For centuries, we assumed that gap was about willpower, or evidence, or which side was simply right. Psychology tells a stranger story. Belief and disbelief both have a blueprint, written in your genes, your brain wiring, and even the neighborhood you grew up safe in. None of it proves God does or doesn't exist. What it proves is that the feeling of certainty on either side has a cause you were probably never aware of. Stick around for number 5, because that one has nothing to do with logic or upbringing at all, and once you hear it, faith itself will look different to you. See how many of these 6 explain your own story, or someone you know. Reason 1. The God-gene twin studies are one of psychology's favorite tricks because they let researchers separate nature from nurture. And when it comes to religion, the split is almost exactly even. In childhood, roughly half of your religious behavior, things like praying or going to services, comes straight from your family and community. If your household prayed, you probably learned to pray. But here's where it gets strange. As people grow into adulthood, that family influence fades and genetics quietly takes over. By your 30s, close to 40% of the difference between you and someone else's personal faith is genetic, not learned. There's no single believe in God gene. It's dozens of genes working together, nudging how strongly you feel, comfort, meaning, or certainty. Identical twins raised in completely different households, one religious, one not, often end up surprisingly similar in how religious they feel as adults. Your parents hand you the starting script. Your biology quietly rewrites parts of it later. Reason 2. The brain's built-in ghost detector. Long before religion had temples or scripture, your ancestors' brains were already wired to assume something invisible was watching. Cognitive scientists call it the hyperactive agency detection device, and it's exactly what it sounds like. A mental smoke alarm tuned to assume danger even when there probably isn't any. Hear a rustle in the bushes, and your brain doesn't calculate the odds of wind versus predator. It just assumes something is there, because in evolutionary terms, a false alarm costs you nothing, but missing a real threat could cost you your life. That same wiring is what makes humans see faces in clouds, sense a presence in an empty room, or assume a deliberate hand behind a coincidence. It doesn't decide which god or spirit is responsible. That part comes from culture. It just plants the seed that says something is out there. Almost every culture on Earth independently developed some version of gods or spirits, which is exactly what you'd expect if this bias is built into the hardware, not copied from one religion to another. Reason 3. Thinking style predicts belief. And this is the one to really sit with. Thinking style predicts belief better than almost anything else psychologists have measured. Researchers use something called the cognitive reflection test, a handful of trick questions designed to catch you relying on gut instinct instead of working through the logic. Across more than 15,000 people, self-identified atheists scored nearly 19% higher on these analytical reasoning tasks than believers did. To be clear, this isn't a measure of intelligence, and it says nothing about who's correct. It measures a specific habit, whether your mind pauses to double-check its first instinct or trusts it and moves on. People who habitually override their gut reaction tend to also apply that same scrutiny to religious claims. People who trust their first instinct tend to extend that same trust to spiritual ones. Researchers even ruled out the obvious objection that the reasoning questions simply came first and put people in a skeptical mood. The pattern held either way. It's not a fluke of test order. It's a genuine link between how a mind processes information and what it's willing to accept on faith. Reason 4. Different neural wiring. And it goes even deeper than habits, all the way into brain activity itself. In one EEG study, researchers measured brain activity in believers and non-believers, while they did nothing more than look at neutral images. The two groups' brains were working in noticeably different ways. Non-believers showed more activity in the regions tied to deliberate, top-down reasoning. Believers showed more activity in older, more intuitive, emotionally driven circuits. In simple terms, one group's brain defaults to analyzing, the other defaults to feeling. Both groups had similar intelligence and similar backgrounds, so this wasn't about who was sharper. It was about which internal system each brain reaches for first. And importantly, researchers noted this isn't fixed for life. Practices like meditation can shift which system a brain leans on, which means belief isn't hardwired destiny. It's a tendency your brain has learned to favor. Reason 5. When brains glitch, the one I told you to wait for, and it has nothing to do with reasoning at all. In rare cases, a seizure disorder called temporal lobe epilepsy can trigger sudden, overwhelming religious experiences out of nowhere. During or right after a seizure, some patients report feeling an intense divine presence, seeing lights, hearing a voice, or feeling a total certainty of the sacred, all without any warning or prior belief. Brain scans during these episodes show abnormal activity in the limbic system, the part of the brain responsible for emotion and meaning-making. When that system misfires, the brain doesn't produce confusion, it produces certainty, and the mind interprets that certainty as contact with something greater. Some historians have even speculated that famous religious conversions throughout history resemble these exact symptoms. This doesn't mean faith is a malfunction. It means the feeling of the sacred has a physical seat in the brain, one that can be triggered by biology alone, completely separate from upbringing, logic, or choice. Reason 6. Safety changes the need for faith. And this one is about the world outside your head, not inside it. Political scientists studying what they call existential security found a striking global pattern. In countries where healthcare, food, and safety are reliably guaranteed, religious belief tends to decline. In countries where survival itself feels uncertain, religion tends to stay strong. The theory is simple. Religion has always offered comfort and explanation in the face of danger. When hospitals, pensions, and stable governments already provide that safety net, the psychological need for a divine one quietly shrinks. This is part of why younger generations in wealthier, more stable nations report far higher rates of non-belief, not because they reject God specifically, but because they never felt the acute need that religion has historically answered. It's not a universal rule. Some wealthy nations remain deeply religious for cultural reasons, but the pattern holds up across dozens of countries and generations. 6 reasons, and notice what they have in common. Not one of them is really about evidence or proof, or who read the more convincing argument. Genetics shapes how strongly you feel comfort in faith. Your brain's ancient alarm system primes you to sense something behind the curtain. Your natural thinking style decides whether you interrogate that instinct or trust it. Your neural wiring decides which system, logic or feeling, your brain defaults to first. In rare cases, biology alone can manufacture the exact feeling people call divine. And the safety of the world around you quietly turns the need for faith up or down like a dial. None of this settles whether God exists. What it does settle is that the certainty you feel, whichever side of the line you're on, was shaped by forces working long before you ever consciously decided anything. So here's the real question to sit with. It was never simply, what do you believe? It was always, which of these 6 forces shaped the belief you now call your own? How many of these matched your story? 1, 3, all 6? If this changed how you think about faith, doubt, or the people who see it differently than you, that's exactly what the Mind Forge is for. Subscribe, because understanding why we believe what we believe might be the most human question there is.